Hello to everyone. Welcome to the How to Build Better Decks with AI webinar brought to you today by VerdanaBold. Just first, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. But let's get right down to it. So before we get into the content, let me start with a quick introduction. My name is Kyle Kartz. I am the creative director for storytelling here at VerdanaBold. And what that means is that I work with our clients to hone their message, shape their stories, and communicate their brand more effectively. Oops, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. So with that introduction, let's talk about today's topic. We get a lot of questions from our clients about how we use AI. And like you, we are just hearing the conversation about it on social, at conferences, pretty much everywhere else that we go. And if you aren't already using AI to support your presentations, you almost certainly will be in the future. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at how you can use some common AI tools to improve your presentations right now. We will walk you through a couple examples of the kinds of content workflows that we have been experimenting with. And then we'll close with a little overview of when we think it's valuable and maybe when not so valuable to try to incorporate AI imagery into your presentations. But before we get into the details, let me tell you just a little bit about VerdanaBold. VerdanaBold is a presentation design, storytelling, and training agency. We are Chicago-based, and we are proud to be a woman-owned company that is built around a small but very mighty team. And while our focus is on presentations, we're really more than just presentation designers. We are partners to clients at some of the biggest brands around. We work hand in hand with folks from a broad range of industries as well as job types to help them build and refine their presentations, shape their stories, and ultimately drive real business results. And over the years, we have worked on more than 75,000 slides. This includes keynote addresses, investor day decks, product launches, startup pitches, really any type of presentation that you can think of, we have worked on. So if you want to see some more of our work or just learn a little bit more about what we do, we recently launched a new website, and we would love it if you could pop over and just take a quick look at the new verdanabold.com. Okay, let's get into the content that we're here to talk about today. So using AI for presentations. AI is already a powerful tool for creative work, and it's only getting better. But even though it can do pretty much anything in the digital world, that doesn't mean that you should let it do everything for you. For creative work, particularly content and writing, there are a few specific ways that AI tools can be particularly useful. So first, AI is great for just helping you come up with ideas. For most people, the blank page can be the hardest part of the writing process. And using AI is a great way to get a creative jumpstart that gives you a huge range of options to consider in seconds. It's also great at offering you feedback. If you've got an idea that you want to explore, you can kind of bounce ideas off of it, just like you were talking to a coworker, and you will get feedback, usually helpful feedback, immediately. And finally, it's really good for giving your work a final polish. Whether you're writing an email or a blog post or the speaker's notes for your presentation, you can pass your completed draft through AI for some final tweaks, proofreading support, even help with just formatting your content. Now, while AI can be incredibly helpful and powerful, it doesn't mean that it's perfect for everything. So for starters, you might sometimes hit roadblocks with more nuanced content, especially when you're aiming for precision relating to your product, which we'll talk a little bit more about specifics and data security later. But when you're dealing with nuanced content relating to products or anywhere where you want to be really subtle with the way that you're talking about something, you're not always going to get the right answer from AI. And next, it's not always great if you need to replicate a really specific tone of voice. So if your brand has a unique style that you want to use, it might ultimately steer you a little bit away from that. And then finally, AI just can't truly replicate being you. Your experiences, your perspective, your unique voice. And these personal elements are really what make presentations such a unique format. And it is very easy for those things to get lost in the shuffle when you're working with AI. So to get into a little more of the details, the examples that in workflows that we're going to look at today are mainly based on tools like ChatGPT, Sora, and the suite of OpenAI powered assistants. And that's mainly because these are probably the most widely available and familiar tools to most users right now. But I do want to note that, these tools, they might change in the future after you've started using some of these ideas. And in fact, they definitely will change. New AI tools are going to be launched. Some companies are even starting to develop their own custom branded AI assistants. But the good news is that the same core approach that we're covering, so how to prompt effectively, how to review critically, how to edit, it's going to apply to any tool you use, whether that's content or images. So whether it's ChatGPT or some brand specific tool that your enterprise has created, the mindset and the method behind this approach are going to stay consistent. So I want to start by talking about content and presentations, because this is something that pretty much everyone is going to work on at some point. And using AI to create content isn't difficult, but the obvious approach isn't necessarily the best one. You've probably seen some examples of this, but there's already a whole internet genre of content based around people just asking AI to do things. Build me a business, write me a song, make me a presentation. And in most of these cases, you kind of see the same pattern play out. People drop in their prompt, they just sort of take the first thing that comes back out of the tool, and then they call it done. This can be fun, right? And sometimes it will even give you something that's really amazing. But it's not always a reliable way to get meeting-ready content. So when you're going to work on slides, the wrong question to ask yourself is, can AI make my presentation? Well, sure, it can, but that's not really the point. The better question is, how can AI help me to make my presentation better? And that shift in mindset is really key to what we're going to be talking about. When you're using AI to create content, the best results will come when you stop trying to outsource everything at once, and instead you start to tackle your content one step at a time. So instead of thinking about AI as just this big machine that creates your whole presentation in one go, think about it more like a toolbox with a different set of tools for different jobs. So when you're outlining, you're solving a different challenge than when you're rewriting a title or adjusting the tone of a slide. Each of these will really benefit from its own approach, its own prompts, and having its own moment of focus. Ultimately, you're still just using one AI tool, but how you are using it can change depending on the task. So now that we've kind of introduced the less effective way to use AI to create a presentation, how can we do it better? One of the major challenges that I find, at least, and I'm sure other people are experiencing this as well with AI content, is that it's generally pretty good. So it might sound odd to say that the downside is that it's good. So maybe to be more specific, the problem is that it's good, but it's not right. At first glance, it can be really easy to just look at the copy it gives you back and say, wow, that's pretty solid. But when all you're using are vague content prompts, you'll quickly find holes in the stories, inaccuracies, cliche headlines, all sorts of things that are ultimately going to require you to spend a lot of time updating them later. So let's look at how we can improve the process of going from prompt to presentation with an AI tool. So our first tip is to set yourself up for success by really setting up your tool to support your specific needs. So, for example, let's say that you're in sales at the Johnson Widgets company. If you just open a new tab and say, create a presentation, it's probably going to be obvious where that's going to fall short, right? You haven't given any specifics. You haven't specified your tone or your style. You just haven't really done anything to help the tool to understand what you're trying to accomplish with your presentation. And so the result is professional sounding, but it's often vague and can even just be unrelated to the actual presentation that you want to give. So what is the alternative? Well, we need to teach the tool what we want to hear from it. So here's an example of the custom GPT that I built for VB. If you want to try this out, play around with it and see how it works, you can use this QR code to get there. But basically what I did was I created a series of documents using, for example, the instructional content that I create for our training, posts from our blog, presentation resources that we've built. And this information then forms the core of the approach that this GPT is going to take to answering questions. So you can create one of these on your own for your own work, your own brand, your own project, however you want to break that up. It's really easy to do, but it might seem like more than you want to take on at first. I get that. If you want, you can still just upload some docs directly to the chat that you're having with the AI, and then it's going to start to use that content as the basis for responding to your prompts. Essentially, what you're doing with this process is you're narrowing the focus of the content that you're going to get back from the tool and making sure that you're getting the types of responses that are actually going to be useful to you. So let's take a look at the difference. Now that we've got a tool that's designed to help with our specific requirements, we're going to give it the same prompt just for testing's sake. It's a bit of a generic prompt, and we'll get into giving more specific prompts next. But you can already see how tailoring this tool is starting to give you more useful content. So now, instead of dumping this generic outline on you, it's starting to hone in on the kind of key questions that you should be asking yourself anyways in order to help create an effective presentation. Right? These are all the questions that you would be asking yourself, but admittedly, sometimes people forget to think about the audience before they start, right? I get it, it happens. Once you start to think through some of these questions, you're going to really have the kind of detailed information that you need to effectively prompt your tool to get to the real content that you'll be using. So we've got our tool, we've got a base of information that we want to use to prompt it. How do we get to the right information from the prompts that we use? I get the sense that most people tend to think of prompting is just asking a question. But with AI, really the quality of what you're going to get back, it depends entirely on the quality of what you put in. So if your prompt is vague, generally the response will be vague too. If your prompt is generic, the content that it spits out is going to feel kind of generic. So power prompting just means breaking down exactly what you need, being clear in how you ask, and then giving enough content for the AI to actually deliver on that request. So let me show you what that looks like. So on the left, we see a pretty standard prompt that someone might use with AI. Write a title for a slide about customer retention. This is probably where a lot of people start when they're just learning to use tools like this. So it kind of makes sense, right? This prompt, it is specific to the slide, but it doesn't really take into account the actual story that you're trying to tell with the content on the slide. And you can see that the output it's pretty bad, right? Now, you might say that I could have kept prompting this and it would give me a better title eventually, and you would be right. But what I want to highlight with this response that it gave me is that this is actually what a lot of slide titles really look like, right? I'm sure you have seen or possibly even given a presentation that uses a really basic descriptive slide title like this on every slide, but we can do better. So on the right, we can see a much more specific prompt. Write a compelling slide title about customer retention. Highlight the impact of reducing churn and make it benefit-driven and executive-friendly. So we can immediately see here a much stronger slide title, right? And the reason that we're able to get there is that the prompt is doing three key things. First is establishing the kind of tone that we want our slide to have. It's giving the tool a single key idea to highlight with that title, which is an essential part of any slide design process. And then finally, it's introducing some audience-driven considerations. And the result is a title that doesn't just tell you what the slide is about, like the first one did, but it also starts to tell you a really clear story about the content on that slide. Let's look at one more example of this. So here we have a pretty common task. We gave the AI tool a paragraph and we asked it to turn the text into bullets. And you can see that what the AI did is just what it was told. It gave us bullet points. But the problem is that 7 bullet points isn't necessarily a whole lot better than a whole long paragraph, right? The bullets don't really tell me anything about the content. It's just a long list of features. So on the right here, we have a prompt that's hopefully going to get us a little closer to the final result right off the bat. Rewrite this paragraph as slide-ready bullet points for a business audience. Focus on clarity, benefits, and flow. Keep it to 3 bullets and include a short line of body copy to introduce them. So again, I want to focus on a couple of key things that the prompt is doing. One is giving clear instructions on the audience and the content expectations that we have for it. 2, it's asking for a limit of 3 bullet points. This is helpful for getting the right content, but it's also helpful because I think that a lot of people struggle sometimes to get lengthier content down to that really concise, short and sweet version. And so right off the bat, we're getting to a more refined set of content. And then finally, we made this request for this introductory body copy that's going to start to put the bullet points into context. The result here is that we have content that's clean, it's focused, and it's more or less presentation ready. We're not just separating out the key points into a list. We're starting to actually organize them and put a new spin on them in whatever way it might be that you specifically prompt the tool for in your own context. And this is really the difference between asking AI to complete a task on the one hand, and then asking it to communicate on the other. And that difference is how that you can start to still own your message while also getting AI to help you shape it. So just by getting more specific with your prompts, you can get a lot more out of your time with your AI tool. But to really maximize your content, you need to go one step further, and you just need to talk to your computer. If you take away just one idea about creating content from this talk today, it's that your goal shouldn't be to prompt and paste or entirely automate your process. Your goal is really to work with AI. And the easiest way to do that is to just treat it like a regular conversation. So here you can see another basic content prompt. Write an opening line for a presentation about productivity tools. And this time, we got a response that's fine, right? It's pretty good, but it might not work for every presenter. It might not be the exact tone I'm looking for, but it's getting us started. If we want to dial this in and then get the tone right and the style correct, we need to keep providing direction. Now, initially, you might not know exactly what you want, which is honestly a really good reason to turn to AI in the first place. In this case, we're just looking for something with a stronger opening hook, right? So we ask it, can you make it more engaging? Some potential options that it could explore too, right? Is there a stat? Is there a question? Something that's going to add more of a hook at the beginning. This is one of the hardest parts of a presentation and one of the most important. So it's great to start by just exploring a little bit. And now I've got this range of responses in different tones, but each one is giving me that key thing that I need, which is a hook to start my presentation. And now we want to just keep going down this funnel and narrow in our focus and keep making adjustments to tone and content as we go. So you can see in this series of prompts, if you take a moment to read as I'm speaking, that we're getting more and more specific as we go, right? In the first one, we're starting to introduce an audience that we might want to replicate the tone of, right? A founder pitching to executives. So we're adjusting not just the content, but the tone of voice of the speaker. We're starting to bring in a really specific speaker, right? We ask it, make it sound like a visionary speaker like Steve Jobs. We could kind of do this forever, right? And try out new approaches, take inspiration from different speakers. But already we've taken our content a long way from the initial response. And now we've got something that's starting to hit that right tone and message. And whether or not this becomes the content that you use in your final presentation, it can also just be a great way to get inspiration for the parts of a presentation that you're stuck on. If you just need something to spark a few ideas to get you rolling, this is one of the best ways to start. So really, this has just been the briefest of overviews of how you can use AI to generate great presentation content, excuse me. And there's still so much more than this that I can do to help you, right? I could talk for hours about all the different ways that you can use it. But for all of these benefits, we do want to address that there are some very real risks to using these tools. So first, and by far most importantly, data security. So at VB, we are always very careful about what we put into any AI tool. So for our own work, this webinar, for example, I might use techniques like what I just walked you through, thinking about the type of prompt, having this conversational back and forth to refine ideas. But anytime sensitive data is involved, I would say you might be better off just skipping AI altogether for now. Or if you're set on using it, working with a version of your content that's been stripped of any confidential info. So, for example, you might ask for titles on a slide about a positive financial outlook, but then not actually tell it who the brand is or any of the financial data, because all of that stuff is ending up stored in a database somewhere, and it's being taken out of your hands at that point. So next, I want to reiterate the point that I made at the beginning of the previous section, which is that AI is great at giving you polished text that can be kind of thin and empty. The reason you don't want to rely on it to create all of your content is that you might get to the end and realize that you didn't actually say any of the points that you wanted to make. Really, it's better to use AI as a starting point and then find ways to make it your own. And then finally, kind of on the same note, don't let AI take over the storytelling. Again, I said this before, but it's easy to find yourself saying, oh, yeah, that sounds fine. That's pretty good. And then just accepting whatever AI gives you back. And then the next thing you know, your presentation's done. You didn't really do any of it, and all of it's kind of wrong. And you've kind of taken the story in a direction that you never intended to. So instead, go step by step and refine, refine, refine at every point. And don't just kind of outsource it all and let it come back as a copy and paste, because ultimately, I think you won't be happy with the results. Okay, we've gotten through the tough part. Now let's move on to the fun part, hopefully AI images. Now, AI image tools are clearly the most visually exciting part of generative AI. All it takes is a simple prompt, and you can get something that's pretty wild or even wildly impressive. And without getting into the ethics of AI image generation, this is a creative power that we've never had before, and it has huge potential. So it's no surprise that this is what's really getting people's attention. But while it can be perfect for creating memes to send to your friends or a mood board that helps to establish the tone of a presentation, when it comes to the actual content of that presentation, we've found that AI imagery doesn't always deliver exactly what you need. So let's take a closer look at what kinds of AI imagery are out there, and then give you a couple of recommendations about how you can actually use those effectively in your presentations. When we talk about AI imagery, we're really looking at two main approaches. The first is image generation, so starting from a prompt to create something totally new. And this is what you probably think of when you think of AI images, right? The second of these approaches is image editing, or taking an existing image or design and then using AI to clean up or edit or alter it in some way. And this is probably used more often in marketing and sales than pure image generation. But both are useful, but ultimately they serve very different purposes. So in this case, we want to talk mainly about image generation because editing it's just a little more specialized. So there are a couple of specific cases when we might, and I emphasize might, recommend that you use AI for creating content. So AI can be a great tool when you're trying to visualize something that's hard to express or hard to find in a traditional stock image, like an abstract concept, or maybe you just need to create something decorative. It can also be useful when you want to create a unique visual or something really specific that's hard to find elsewhere. So a GOAT CEO, for example. And then during brainstorming or early stage development of a presentation, this can be a really fast and efficient way to test ideas or to create placeholders that are going to spark further thinking or just get you ultimately towards your actual asset. And this can really be a great way for people who need to communicate an idea or direction to a designer who's then going to help them with a presentation. It's a great way for people to sort of organize their thoughts and give some advice that at least, or some direction that helps people to understand what they're looking for on a slide. But for the most part, though, it's our opinion at the moment that you're still sort of better off not using AI images in your presentations. Now, I know that it seems like they can offer a lot of flexibility, but ultimately, it still feels like the cons outweigh the pros. And here's why. So first, AI is not great at accuracy. If you need detailed text on an image or just a very specific image, chances are you aren't going to get it right with AI. At least not today. Similarly, it's pretty bad at consistency. You might create an image of a man who's using your app on an iPad, but then when you need to recreate him in several different photos, you start to run into problems. And finally, despite all of the talk that we hear of AI as this amazing time saver, I promise you that if you start trying to generate images for your presentation, it's very easy to end up wasting a ton of time trying to get it just right, only to never actually get there. So the real point when we're talking about AI images is just to use AI intentionally, not because it's a shiny new tool or because you've heard it's better than a different approach. Instead, use it because, like any other tool, it's the right one for the job. The big takeaway here, I think, from both of these sections, the content and the images, is that to get the best results from AI tools, you really need to be precise with your direction. So whether you're creating a custom GPT, you're spending extra time refining your prompts, or just getting comfortable having a conversation with a clicking cursor inside of a box, the more context and guidance that you can provide to the tool, the better your results will be. So I hope that today's talk about AI has sparked some new ways to think about how you can improve your next presentation. But sometimes even AI can't give you all the answers. If there's a slide you've been stuck on, maybe something where the layout's unclear or the content just doesn't land when you present it, we would love to help. We run an ongoing series of slide redesign webinars, and we would love anyone in the audience to send us your most challenging slides to slides@verdanabold.com, and we will redesign it and share the results on one of our upcoming redesign webinars. There's no tricks, there's no obligations. This is just about real presentation thinking applied to your toughest slides. So that was a lot, but thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And remember, send us your slides if you would like to be featured in an upcoming webinar, and be sure to check out the new VerdanaBold.com for more on all things presentation. And that is it. Thank you again, and we will see you soon.